Chapter 7 of The Cat of Bubastes, A Tale of Ancient Egypt. This recording is in the public domain. The Cat of Bubastes, by G. A. Henty. Chapter 7. Hippopotamus and Crocodile. Guided by Rabah, the party now descended to the edge of the swamp. Here in the shallow water lay 3 boats, or rather rafts, constructed of bundles of bulrushes. They were turned up in front so as to form a sort of swan-necked bow, and in outline were exactly similar to the iron of modern skates. Upon each stood a native with a pole for pushing the rafts along, and 3 or 4 spears. These were of unusual shape, and the lads examined them with curiosity. They had broad short blades, and these were loosely attached to the shafts, so that when the animal was struck the shaft would drop out, leaving the head embedded in its flesh. To the head was attached a cord which was wound up on a spindle passing through a handle. "Those rafts do not look as if they would carry 3," Chebron said. "They will do so at a push," the man replied, "but they are better with 2 only." "I will stop on shore with your permission, Chebron," Jethro said. "I see there are a number of men here with ropes. I suppose they have something to do with the business, and I will accompany them." "The ropes are for hauling the beasts ashore after we have struck them." "Well, I will go and help pull them. I can do my share at that, and should be of no use on one of those little rafts. Indeed, I think that my weight would bury it under the water." "We have been out this morning, my lord," the boatman said, addressing Chebron, "and have found out that there is a river horse lying in a pool a mile up the river. I think he is a large one, and will give us good sport." Chebron and Amuba now took their places on the 2 rafts, and the men, laying down the spears and taking the poles, pushed off from the shore. Noiselessly they made their way among the rushes. Sometimes the channels were so narrow that the reeds almost brushed the rafts on both sides. Then they opened out into wide pools, and here the water deepened so much that the poles could scarce touch the bottom. Not a word was spoken, as the men had warned them that the slightest noise would scare the hippopotami and cause them to sink to the bottom of the pools, where they would be difficult to capture. After half an hour's poling they reached a pool larger than any they had hitherto passed, and extending on one side almost to the bank of the river. The man on his raft now signed to Chebron to take up one of the spears, but the lad shook his head and motioned him to undertake the attack, for he felt that, ignorant as he was of the habits of the animal, it would be folly for him to engage in such an adventure. The man nodded, for he had indeed been doubting as to the course which the affair would take, for it needed a thrust with a very powerful arm to drive the spear through the thick hide of the hippopotamus. Amuba imitated Chebron's example, preferring to be a spectator instead of an actor in this unknown sport. For 3 or 4 minutes the boats lay motionless. Then a blowing sound was heard, and the boatman pointed to what seemed to the boys 2 lumps of black mud projecting an inch or 2 above the water near the margin of the rushes. They could not have believed that these formed part of an animal, but that slight ripples widening out on the glassy water showed that there had been a movement on the spot indicated. With a noiseless push Chebron's hunter sent the boat in that direction, and then handed the end of the pole to Chebron, signing to him to push the boat back when he gave the signal. When within 10 yards of the 2 little black patches there was a sudden movement. They widened into an enormous head, and a huge beast rose to his feet, startled at the discovery he had just made that men were close at hand. In an instant the hunter hurled his spear with all his force. Tough as was the animal's hide, the sharp head cut its way through. With a roar the beast plunged into the rushes, the shaft of the spear falling out of its socket as it did so, and the strong cord ran out rapidly from the reel held by the hunter. Presently the strain ceased. "He has laid down again in shelter," the hunter said. "We will now follow him and give him a second spear." Pushing the rushes aside the boat was forced along until they again caught sight of the hippopotamus, that was standing up to its belly in water. "Is he going to charge?" Chebron asked, grasping a spear. "No, there is little chance of that. Should he do so and upset the boat, throw yourself among the rushes and lie there with only your face above water. I will divert his attention and come back and get you into the boat when he has made off." Another spear was thrown with good effect. There was a roar and a great splash. Chebron thought that the animal was upon them, but he turned off and dashed back to the pool where he had been first lying. "I thought that was what he would do," the hunter said. "They always seek shelter in the bottom of the deep pools, and here, you see, the water is not deep enough to cover him." The boat again followed the hippopotamus. Amuba was still on his raft on the pool. "What has become of him?" Chebron asked as they passed beyond the rushes. "He has sunk to the bottom of the pool," Amuba replied. "He gave me a start, I can tell you. We heard him bursting through the rushes, and then he rushed out with his mouth open, a mouth like a cavern, and then, just as I thought he was going to charge us, he turned off and sank to the bottom of the pool." "How long will he lie there?" Chebron asked the hunter.
"A long time if he is left to himself, but we are going to stir him up."
So saying, he directed the boat toward the rushes nearest to the bank and pushed the boat through them. "Oh, here you are, Jethro," Chebron said, seeing the Rebu and the men he had accompanied standing on the bank. "What has happened, Chebron? Have you killed one of them? We heard a sort of roar and a great splashing." "We have not killed him, but there are two spearheads sticking into him." The hunter handed the cords to the men and told them to pull steadily, but not hard enough to break the cords. Then he took from them the end of the rope they carried and pulled back into the pool. "Those cords are not strong enough to pull the great beast to the shore, are they?" Chebron asked.
"Oh no, they would not move him, but by pulling on them it causes the spearheads to give him pain. He gets uneasy and rises to the surface in anger. Then, you see, I throw this noose over his head, and they can pull upon that." In 2 or 3 minutes the animal's head appeared above the water. The instant it did so the hunter threw the noose. The aim was correct, and with a jerk he tightened it round the neck. "Now pull!" he
shouted. The peasants pulled, and gradually the hippopotamus was drawn toward the bank, although struggling to swim in the opposite direction. As soon, however, as he reached the shallow water and his feet touched the ground he threw his whole weight upon the rope. The peasants were thrown to the ground and the rope dragged through their fingers as the hippopotamus again made his way to the bottom of the pool. The peasants regained their feet and pulled on the rope and cords. Again the hippopotamus rose and was dragged to the shallow, only to break away again. For 8 or 10 times this happened.
"He is getting tired now," the hunter said. "Next time or the time after they will get him on shore. We will land then and attack him with spears and arrows."
The hippopotamus was indeed exhausted, and allowed itself to be dragged ashore at the next effort without opposition. As soon as it did so he was attacked with spears by the hunters, Jethro, and the boys. The latter found that they were unable to drive their weapons through the thick skin, and betook themselves to their bows and arrows. The hunters, however, knew the points at which the skin was thinnest, and drove their spears deep into the animal just behind the foreleg, while the boys shot their arrows at its mouth. Another noose had been thrown over its head as it issued from the water, and the peasants pulling on the ropes prevented it from charging. 3 or 4 more thrusts were given from the hunters, then one of the spears touched a vital part. The hippopotamus sank on its knees and rolled over dead. The peasants sent up a shout of joy, for the flesh of the hippopotamus is by no means bad eating, and here was a store of food sufficient for the whole neighborhood.
"Shall we search for another, my lord?"
the hunter asked Chebron. "No, I think I have had enough of this. There is no fun in killing an animal that has not spirit to defend itself. What do you think, Amuba?" "I quite agree with you, Chebron. One might almost as well slaughter a cow. What is that?" he exclaimed suddenly as a loud scream was heard at a short distance away. "It is a woman's voice." Chebron darted off in full speed in the direction of the sound, closely followed by Amuba and Jethro. They ran about 100 yards along the bank when they saw the cause of the outcry. An immense crocodile was making his way toward the river, dragging along with it the figure of a woman. In spite of his reverence for the crocodile Chebron did not hesitate a moment, but rushing forward smote the crocodile on the nose with all his strength with the shaft of his spear. The crocodile dropped its victim and turned upon its assailant, but Jethro and Amuba were close behind, and these also attacked him. The crocodile, seeing this accession of enemies, now set out for the river, snapping its jaws together.
"Mind its tail!"
one of the hunters exclaimed, running up. But the warning was too late, for the next moment Amuba received a tremendous blow which sent him to the ground. The hunter at the same moment plunged his spear into the animal through the soft skin at the back of its leg. Jethro followed his example on the other side. The animal checked its flight, and turning round and round lashed with its tail in all directions.
"Keep clear of it!" the hunter shouted. "It is mortally wounded and will need no more blows."
In fact the crocodile had received its death wound. Its movements became more languid, it ceased to lash its tail, though it still snapped at those nearest to it, but gradually this action also ceased, its head sank, and it was dead. Jethro, as soon as he had delivered his blow, ran to Amuba. "Are you hurt?" he asked anxiously. "No, I don't think so," Amuba gasped. "The brute has knocked all the breath out of my body, but that's better than if he had hit me in the leg, for I think he would have broken it had he done so. How is the woman? Is she dead?" "I have not had time to see," Jethro replied. "Let me help you to your feet, and let us see if any of your ribs are broken. I will see about her afterward." Amuba, on getting up, declared that he did not think he was seriously hurt, although unable for the time to stand upright. "I expect I am only bruised, Jethro. It was certainly a tremendous whack he gave me, and I expect I shall not be able to take part in any sporting for the next few days. The crocodile was worth a dozen hippopotami. There was some courage about him." They now walked across to Chebron, who was stooping over the figure of the crocodile's victim. "Why, she is but a girl!" Amuba exclaimed. "She is no older than your sister, Chebron." "Do you think she is dead?" Chebron asked in hushed tones. "I think she has only fainted," Jethro replied. "Here!" he shouted to one of the peasants who were gathered round the crocodile. "One of you run down to the water and bring up a gourd full." "I don't think she is dead," Amuba said. "It seemed to me that the crocodile had seized her by the leg." "We must carry her somewhere," Jethro said, "and get some woman to attend to her. I will see if there is a hut near." He sprang up to the top of some rising ground and looked round. "There is a cottage close at hand," he said as he returned. "I dare say she belongs there." Bidding two of the peasants run to fetch some women, he lifted up the slight figure and carried her up the slope, the two lads following. On turning round the foot of a sand hill they saw a cottage lying nestled behind it. It was neater and better kept than the majority of the huts of the peasants. The walls of baked clay had been whitewashed and were half covered with bright flowers. A patch of carefully cultivated ground lay around it. Jethro entered the cottage. On a settle at the further end a man was sitting. He was apparently of great age. His hair and long beard were snowy white. "What is it?" he exclaimed as Jethro entered. "Has the God of our fathers again smitten me in my old age, and taken from me my pet lamb? I heard her cry, but my limbs have lost their power, and I could not rise to come to her aid." "I trust that the child is not severely injured," Jethro said. "We had just killed a hippopotamus when we heard her scream, and running up found a great crocodile dragging her to the river, but we soon made him drop her. I trust that she is not severely hurt. The beast seemed to us to have seized her by the leg. We have sent to fetch some women. Doubtless they will be here immediately. Ah, here's the water." He laid the girl down upon a couch in the corner of the room, and taking the gourd from the peasant who had brought it sprinkled some water on her face, while Amuba by his direction rubbed her hands. It was some minutes before she opened her eyes, and just as she did so two women entered the hut. Leaving the girl to their care, Jethro and the boys left the cottage. "I trust that the little maid is not greatly hurt," Amuba said. "By her dress it seems to me that she is an Israelite, though I thought we had left their land behind us on the other side of the desert. Still, her dress resembles those of the women we saw in the village as we passed. And it is well for her it does so, for they wear more and thicker garments than the Egyptian peasant women, and the brute's teeth may not have torn her severely." In a few minutes one of the women came out and told them that the maid had now recovered and that she was almost unhurt. "The crocodile seems to have seized her by her garments rather than her flesh, and although the teeth have bruised her, the skin is unbroken. Her grandfather would fain thank you for the service you have rendered him." They re-entered the cottage. The girl was sitting on the ground at her grandfather's feet holding one of his hands in hers, while with his other he was stroking her head. As they entered, the women, seeing that their services were no longer required, left the cottage. "Who are those to whom I owe the life of my grandchild?" the old man asked. "I am Chebron, the son of Ameres, the high priest of the temple of Osiris at Thebes. These are my friends Amuba and Jethro, two of the Rebu nation who were brought to Egypt and now live in my father's household." "We are his servants," Amuba said, "though he is good enough to call us his friends." "'Tis strange," the old man said, "that the son of a priest of Osiris should thus come to gladden the last few hours of one who has always withstood the Egyptian gods. And yet had the crocodile carried off my Ruth, it would have been better for her, seeing that ere the sun has risen and set many times she will be alone in the world." The girl uttered a little cry, and rising on her knees threw her arms round the old man's neck. "It must be so, my Ruth. I have lived 110 years in this land of the heathen, and my course is run, and were it not for your sake I should be glad that it is so, for my life has been sorrow and bitterness. I call her my grandchild, but she is in truth the daughter of my grandchild, and all who stood between her and me have passed away before me, and left us alone together. But she trusts in the God of Abraham, and he will raise up a protector for her." Chebron, who had learned something of the traditions of the Israelites dwelling in Egypt, saw by the old man's words that Jethro's surmises were correct and that he belonged to that race. "You are an Israelite," he said gently. "How is it that you are not dwelling among your people instead of alone among strangers?" "I left them 30 years back when Ruth's mother was but a tottering child. They would not suffer me to dwell in peace among them, but drove me out because I testified against them." "Because you testified against them?" Chebron repeated in surprise. "Yes, my father was already an old man when I was born, and he was one of the few who still clung to the faith of our fathers. He taught me that there was but one God, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, and that all other gods were but images of wood and stone. To that faith I clung, though after a while I alone of all our people held to the belief. The others had forgotten their God and worshipped the gods of the Egyptians. When I would speak to them they treated my words as ravings and as casting dishonor on the gods they served. My sons went with the rest, but my daughter learned the true faith from my lips and clung to it. She taught her daughter after her, and 10 years ago, when she too lay dying, she sent Ruth by a messenger to me, praying me to bring her up in the faith of our fathers, and saying that though she knew I was of a great age, she doubted not that when my time came God would raise up protectors for the child. So for 10 years we have dwelt here together, tilling and watering our ground and living on its fruit, and by the sale of baskets that we weave and exchange for fish with our neighbors. The child worships the God of our fathers, and has grown and thriven here for 10 years. But my heart is heavy at the thought that my hours are numbered, and that I see no way after me but that Ruth shall return to our people, who will assuredly in time wean her from her faith." "Never, grandfather," the girl said firmly. "They may beat me and persecute me, but I will never deny my God." "They are hard people, the Israelites," the old man said, shaking his head, "and they are stubborn and must needs prevail against one so tender. However, all matters are in the hands of God, who will again reveal himself in his due time to his people who have forgotten him." Amuba, looking at the girl, thought that she had more power of resistance than the old man gave her credit for. Her face was of the same style of beauty as that of some of the young women he had seen in the villages of the Israelites, but of a higher and finer type. Her face was almost oval, with soft black hair, and delicately marked eyebrows running almost in a straight line below her forehead. Her eyes were large and soft, with long lashes veiling them, but there was a firmness about the lips and chin that spoke of a determined will and gave strength to her declaration, "Never!" There was silence a moment, and then Chebron said almost timidly, "My father, although high priest of Osiris, is not a bigot in his religion. He is wise and learned, and views all things temperately, as my friends here can tell you. He knows of your religion, for I have heard him say that when they first came into this land the Israelites worshipped one God only. I have a sister who is of about the same age as Ruth, and is gentle and kind. I am sure that if I ask my father he will take your grandchild into his household to be a friend and companion to Mysa, and I am certain that he would never try to shake her religion, but would let her worship as she chooses." The old man looked fixedly at Chebron. "Your speech is pleasant and kind, young sir, and your voice has an honest ring. A few years back I would have said that I would rather the maiden were dead than a handmaid in the house of an Egyptian, but as death approaches we see things differently, and it may be that she would be better there than among those who once having known the true God have forgotten him and taken to the worship of idols. I have always prayed and believed that God would raise up protectors for Ruth, and it seems to me now that the way you have been brought hither in these latter days of my life is the answer to my prayer.
"Ruth, my child, you have heard the offer, and it is for you to decide. Will you go with this young Egyptian lord and serve his sister as a handmaiden, or will you return to the villages of our people?"
Ruth had risen to her feet now, and was looking earnestly at Chebron. Then her eyes turned to the faces of Amuba and Jethro, and then slowly went back again to Chebron. "I believe that God has chosen for me," she said at last, "and has sent them here not only to save my life, but to be protectors to me. Their faces are all honest and good. If the father of this youth will receive me, I will, when you leave me, go and be the handmaid of his daughter."
"It is well," the old man said. "Now I am ready to depart, for my prayers have been heard. May God deal with you and yours, Egyptian, even as you deal with my child."
"May it be so," Chebron replied reverently.
"I can tell you," Jethro said to the old man, "that in no household in Egypt could your daughter be happier than in that of Ameres. He is the lord and master of Amuba and myself, and yet, as you see, his son treats us not as servants, but as friends. Ameres is one of the kindest of men, and as to his daughter Mysa, whose special attendant I am, I would lay down my life to shield her from harm. Your grandchild could not be in better hands. As to her religion, although Ameres has often questioned Amuba and myself respecting the gods of our people, he has never once shown the slightest desire that we should abandon them for those of Egypt."
"And now," Chebron said, "we will leave you, for doubtless the excitement has wearied you, and Ruth needs rest and quiet after her fright. We are encamped a mile away near the lake, and will come and see you tomorrow." Not a word was spoken for some time after they left the house, and then Chebron said: "It really would almost seem as if what that old man said was true, and that his God had sent us there that a protector might be found for his daughter. It was certainly strange that we should happen to be within sound of her voice when she was seized by that crocodile, and be able to rescue her just in time. It needed, you see, first, that we should be there, then that the crocodile should seize her at that moment, and lastly that we should be just in time to save her being dragged into the river. A crocodile might have carried her away 10,000 times without anyone being within reach to save her, and the chances were enormously against anyone who did save her being in a position to offer her a suitable home at her grandfather's death. It is certainly strange. You do not think that your father will have any objection to take her?" Amuba asked. "Oh, no. He may say that he does not want any more servants in the house, but I am sure that when he sees her he will be pleased to have such a companion for Mysa. If it was my mother, I do not know. Most likely she would say no, but when she hears that it has all been settled, she will not trouble one way or the other about it. I will write my father a letter telling him all about it, and send off one of the slaves with it at once. He can get back tomorrow, and it will gladden the old man's heart to know that it is all arranged. I wish to tell my father, too, of my trouble." "What trouble?" Amuba asked in surprise. "You have told me nothing about anything troubling you." "Do you not understand, Amuba? I am in trouble because I struck the crocodile. It is an impious action, and yet what could I do?" Amuba repressed an inclination to smile. "You could do nothing else, Chebron, for there was no time to mince matters. He was going too fast for you to explain to him that he was doing wrong in carrying off a girl, and you therefore took the only means in your power of stopping him. Besides, the blow you dealt him did him no injury whatever. It was Jethro and the hunter who killed him. But had I not delayed his flight they could not have done so. That is true enough, Chebron, but in that case he would have reached the water with his burden and devoured her at his leisure. Unless you think that his life is of much more importance than hers, I cannot see that you have anything to reproach yourself with." "You do not understand me, Amuba," Chebron said pettishly. "Of course I do not think that the life of an ordinary animal is of as much importance as that of a human being, but the crocodiles are sacred, and misfortune falls upon those who injure them." "Then in that case, Chebron, misfortune must fall very heavily on the inhabitants of those districts where the crocodile is killed wherever he is found. I have not heard that pestilence and famine visit those parts of Egypt with more frequency than they do the districts where the crocodile is venerated." Chebron made no answer. What Amuba said was doubtless true, but upon the other hand, he had always been taught that the crocodile was sacred, and if so he could not account for the impunity with which these creatures were destroyed in other parts of Egypt. It was another of the puzzles that he so constantly met with. After a long pause he replied:
"It may seem to be as you say, but you see, Amuba, there are some gods specially worshipped in one district, others in another. In the district that a god specially protects he would naturally be indignant were the animals sacred to him to be slain, while he might pay no heed to the doings in those parts in which he is little concerned. In that case, Chebron, you can clearly set your mind at rest. Let us allow that it is wrong to kill a crocodile in the district in which he is sacred and where a god is concerned about his welfare, but that no evil consequences can follow the slaying of him in districts in which he is not sacred, and where his god, as you say, feels little interest in him. I hope that it is so, Amuba, and that as the crocodile is not a sacred animal here no harm may come from my striking one, though I would give much that I had not been obliged to do so. I hope that my father will regard the matter in the same light." "I have no doubt that he will do so, Chebron, especially as we agreed that you did no real harm to the beast." "Is it not strange, Jethro," Amuba said when Chebron had gone into the tent, "that wise and learned people like the Egyptians should be so silly regarding animals?"
"It is strange, Amuba, and it was hard to keep from laughing to hear you so gravely arguing the question with Chebron. If all the people held the same belief I should not be surprised, but as almost every animal worshipped in one of the districts is hated and slain in another, and that without any evil consequences arising, one would have thought that they could not but see for themselves the folly of their belief. What are we going to do tomorrow?"
"I do not think that it is settled. We have had one day at each of the sports. Rabah said that tomorrow we could either go out and see new modes of fishing, or accompany the fowlers and watch them catching birds in the clap nets, or go out into the desert and hunt ibex. Chebron did not decide, but I suppose when he has finished his letter we shall hear what he intends to do."
After Chebron had finished his letter, which was a long one, he called Rabah and asked him to dispatch it at once by the fleetest footed of the slaves.
"He will get there," he said, "before my father retires to rest. If he does not reply at once he will probably answer in the morning, and at any rate the man ought to be back before midday." At dinner Amuba asked Chebron whether he had decided what they should do the next day. "We might go and look at the men with the clap nets," Chebron answered. "They have several sorts in use, and take numbers of pigeons and other birds. I think that will be enough for tomorrow. We have had 4 days' hard work, and a quiet day will be pleasant. And if we find the time goes slowly we can take a boat across the lake and look at the great sea beyond the sand hills that divide the lake from it. Beside, I hope we shall get my father's answer, and I should like some further talk with that old Israelite. It is interesting to learn about the religion that his forefathers believed in, and in which it seems that he and his grandchild are now the last to have faith." "It will suit me very well to have a quiet day, Chebron, for in any case I do not think I could have accompanied you. My ribs are sore from the whack the crocodile gave me with his tail, and I doubt whether I shall be able to walk tomorrow."
Indeed, the next morning Amuba was so stiff and sore that he was unable to rise from his couch. Soon after breakfast the messenger returned, bringing a letter from Ameres. It was as follows: "It seems to me, Chebron, that Mysa has no occasion for further attendance, but as your story of this old Israelite and his daughter interests me, and the girl is of Mysa's age and might be a pleasant companion for her, I have no objection to her entering our household. I should have liked to talk with the old man himself, and to have heard from him more about the religion that Joseph and his people brought to Egypt. It is recorded in some of the scrolls that these people were monotheists, but although I have many times questioned Israelites, all have professed to be acquainted with no religion but that of Egypt. If you have further opportunity find out as much as you can from this old man upon the subject. Assure him from me that his daughter shall be kindly treated in my household, and that no attempt whatever will be made to turn her from the religion she professes. As to your adventure with the crocodile, I do not think that your conscience need trouble you. It would certainly be unfortunate to meet in Upper Egypt a crocodile carrying off a peasant, and I am not called upon to give an opinion as to what would be the proper course to pursue under the circumstances, but as you are at present in a district where the crocodile, instead of being respected, is held in detestation, and as the people with you would probably have overtaken and slain him even without your intervention, I do not think that you need trouble yourself about the knock that you gave him across his snout. Had I found myself in the position you did I should probably have taken the same course.
With respect to the girl, you had best give them instructions that when the old man dies she shall travel by boat to Thebes. Arrived there she will find no difficulty in learning which is my house, and on presenting herself there she will be well received. I will write at once to Mysa, telling her that you have found a little Israelite handmaiden as her special attendant, and that, should the girl arrive before my return, she is at once to assume that position. It would not do for her to come here were her grandfather to die before we leave for home. In the first place she would be in the way, and in the second her features and dress would proclaim her to be an Israelite. The people in the villages she passed through might detain her, and insist on her remaining with them; or, should she arrive here, the fact of her departing with us might be made a subject of complaint, and the Israelites would not improbably declare that I had carried off a young woman of their tribe as a slave. Therefore, in all respects, it is better that she should proceed up the river to Thebes. As they are poor, you had best leave a sum of money with them to pay for her passage by boat, and for her support during the voyage. I find that I shall have finished with the steward earlier than I had expected, and shall be starting in about 3 days to inspect the canals and lay out plans for some fresh ones. Therefore, if by that time you have had enough sport to satisfy you, you had best journey back."
"My father has consented," Chebron said joyously as he finished the letter. "I felt sure that he would. Still I was anxious till I got the letter, for it would have been a great disappointment to the old man could it not have been managed. I will go off and tell him at once. I shall not want you this morning, Jethro, so you can either stay here with Amuba or do some fishing or fowling on the lake. The boat is all in readiness, you know." Chebron went off to the cottage. Ruth was in the garden tending the vegetables, and he stopped to speak to her before entering. "I have not heard yet," he said, "how it came about that you were seized by the crocodile."
"I hardly know how it was," she said. "I am in the habit of going down many times a day to fetch up water for the garden, and I always keep a lookout for these creatures before I fill my jar. But yesterday I had just gone round the corner of the sandhill when I was struck down with a tremendous blow, and a moment afterward the creature seized me. I gave a scream, but I thought I was lost, for there are no neighbors within the sound of the voice, and my grandfather has not been able to walk for months. Then I prayed as well as I could for the pain, and God heard me and sent you to deliver me."
"It is not often that they go up so far from the river, is it?"
"Not often, but yesterday we had a portion of a kid from a neighbor and were cooking it, and perhaps the smell attracted the crocodile, for they say that they are quick at smell, and they have been known to go into cottages and carry off meat from before the fire."
"I see you walk very lame still."
"Yes, grandfather would have me keep still for a day or two, but I think that as soon as the bruises die out and the pain ceases I shall be as well as ever. Beside, what would the garden do without water? My grandfather will be glad to see you, my lord, but he is rather more feeble than usual this morning. The excitement of yesterday has shaken him."
She led the way into the cottage. "Your granddaughter has told me you are not very strong today," Chebron began.
"At my age," the old man said, "even a little thing upsets one, and the affair of yesterday was no little thing. I wonder much that the agitation did not kill me."
"I have satisfactory news to give you," Chebron said. "I yesterday dispatched a message to my father, and have just received the answer." And taking out the scroll he read aloud the portion in which Ameres stated his readiness to receive Ruth in his household, and his promise that no pressure whatever should be put upon her to abandon her religion.
"The Lord be praised!" the old man exclaimed. "The very animals are the instruments of his will, and the crocodile that threatened death to the child was, in truth, the answer sent to my prayer. I thank you, my young lord, and as you and yours deal with my child, so may the God of my fathers deal with you. But she may stay on with me for the little time that remains, may she not?"
"Surely. We should not think of taking her now. My father sends instructions as to what she is to do, and money to pay for her journey up the Nile to Thebes. This is what he says," and he read the portion of the scroll relating to the journey. "And now," he said, "let me read to you what my father says about your religion. He is ever a searcher after truth, and would fain that I should hear from your lips and repeat to him all that you can tell me relating to this God whom you worship."
"That will I with gladness, my young lord. The story is easily told, for it is simple, and not like that of your religion with its many deities."
Chebron took a seat upon a pile of rushes and prepared to listen to the old man's story of the God of the Israelites. End of chapter 7.